Hello and welcome. We're going to be talking about Keynote today, Keynote 101. So a beginner's guide to Keynote, and just sort of giving you an introduction to it, and then we'll move on to some slightly more advanced stuff as well. I do think that Keynote is a really underrated app as it goes. It's one that everyone who's got a Mac has got because it's a free app from Apple, and it's their sort of equivalent of Keynote, of PowerPoint, in case you weren't aware. But I do actually find that Keynote is far more advanced, I should say, than PowerPoint, and I always choose Keynote over PowerPoint given the choice. So we'll be talking about, as I say, how to use it to set up presentations, but we'll also be looking at it from the point of view of how to use it to create graphics. So you can export video files, graphics files from it in that respect as well. And I also use it to create all the icons for my Stream Deck, and I'll be talking about how I do that a little bit later as well. So it's a really full-featured package. The reason why I'm doing this, by the way, that what prompted it was all of last week I was over on the Ecam Live channel presenting the Ecam Advanced series, and one of the particular sessions I did there was all about how to create or use the Keynote to add sort of animated graphics and things like that into Ecam Live. And I got lots of questions about Keynote, and people who weren't really aware of what it could do. And so that's what's really prompted this today. So if you've got any questions, do drop them into the chat, of course. And yeah, we'll try to get through to all of those in due course. Hi to everyone I can see in the chat already. Great to see some familiar names and familiar faces there. So I'll just get straight on in with it, though, and I'll circle back to the comments and questions a little bit later. So if I just bring up my Keynote, and we'll just get straight on into starting off creating a new document. So as soon as you open Keynote and create a new document, you'll be presented with something like this, where you can choose a theme. Basically, it has got some sort of pre-made themes and things like that you can use. I'm just going to start with a completely blank presentation to begin with, because we'll sort of build everything up from there. You do have the option here to change between either widescreen 16:9, which is this kind of format, or the old style of slides, which always used to be 4:3. But generally these days, I think most people are going to be using the widescreen. You can do more adjustment to the actual size of the document once you've started it up, as we'll see. But I'll just choose this blank presentation to begin with. Click on create, and then it is going to create that over here. Obviously, it's going to move the window right out of the way from where I wanted it. Let me just position it back here. So first of all, let's have a little bit of a tour of the interface. Now, when you open it up, you will see that it's got this sort of document layout panel open. But if that isn't open, you can click up here. So the interface is basically, you've got slides down the left-hand side, and then there's different panels depending on what you're doing to change different aspects of the of what you're doing in the presentation, and those are accessed from up here. So you've got format, animate, and document. So let's actually start with the document settings. So I'm going to click on document. And here you've got a few things that you're going to do to set up the document that you're creating, the presentation that you're creating. So you can see that the theme that we selected is here. You can go through afterwards and change it to a different theme, and it should update everything accordingly with all of those styles and things like that. A few settings here: automatically play upon open. So if you were doing a slideshow, for example, that you wanted to run in a booth, for example, at a conference maybe, or a trade show or whatever, then this one, automatically play on open, means that as soon as you open the file, it's going to automatically play it as a slideshow. So that might be something that you want to do there. Loop slideshow, again, if you've got something that's, I always come back to this example. This is where I've used it before, like at trade shows or things like that, and you just want it to continuously loop around your presentation, then that would be what that's for. Restart show if idle for 15 minutes. Self-explanatory. Presentation type. Now, the general one that you might be used to is, you want to start a presentation and you're going to deliver that presentation by, clicking through slides or whatever it is. So that's the first one. That's what normal is. Links only. You can actually create a sort of navigable slideshow where you might have, on-screen links. You can do hyperlinking between different slides and things like that. So you might have something that is more like what's the word, user interface, I suppose, where people can actually come and click, take them through to some information, click back, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to have something like that, which is, I think, a rather niche use case, but that would be what links only is. And then self-playing is again, it's just going to play automatically. It controls all of the transitions. You're not going to be sort of clicking through slides. So for most people, generally, I would guess the normal, hence the name, is going to be the one that you're going to want to use. Now, the slide size here is widescreen, and this is the same as we saw on the first page as well, where you the splash screen to choose your slide type. You would have standard or widescreen, but you can actually make it any size. So if you want some different size, then you can come down here to where it says custom slide size, and you can actually create absolutely any size that you want. And I mentioned in the intro that you can create icons for Stream Deck. We'll look at that a little bit later, but basically here you would just create a totally square slide. So you could change that to 1,000 by 1,000 or whatever, and then you've got a square canvas to work on. So you can basically change this to whatever size you want. You aren't actually just limited to those two options of widescreen and standard. Require password to open, obviously self-explanatory there. There is another thing here to do with the document settings, and that is the audio. And what you can do is, if you want to present a slideshow and record it like within Keynote with your narration over the top of it, you can actually do that. So record slideshow here, click on record, and then you can add, basically run through it. So if you wanted to make a sort of pre-packaged presentation with your audio over the top of it, you can just do it straight in there. Obviously, I'm going to be recommending that anytime you want to do presentations, then do it in Ecam to have you on the screen as well, and that sort of thing. So, but anyway, you can still do that, and you can also add a soundtrack. But if you just want to make something quickly in here that's going to play, then you can do that. So that is the document settings. I'll come back to I'll circle back to the questions. I see your question, Marty, about the transitions. I'll come back to the questions when I've gone through all the transition part, because I will be coming to that. So keep the questions coming, though. I will circle back to get all of those. If we then come to the other settings that we've got at the top, the other panels, so that was the document panel. We've also got animate, which we'll be coming to in a little while. We'll talk about that, but that's where you set all different animation settings for the slides and for elements within the slide, which we'll look at in a moment. And then you've also got the format, and this is where you're going to be formatting all of the on-screen elements. And basically, this is going to change dependent on what you have got selected. So this inspector panel, as they call them, is basically related to whatever you select on screen. So if I was to click into here, you'll see that then that inspector panel changed, because now we've got some text highlighted. So I'll just type in my title like that. So here is where you've got the inspector, where you can change various different things. And you'll also notice we've now got different submenus. So we've got style, we've got text, we've got arrange. If I had a shape, I'll just drop a shape onto the screen, and I'll go through what you can do with all of these in a moment. But if I select that one, then you'll see that we have some slightly different options that appear here based on the thing that we've got selected. So I'll go through that as we look at different elements on the screen. But for the time being, I'll just move on to a couple of other useful panels that you might be interested in, or that I find useful. Well, one in particular, really. In terms of the layout, I've told you that you've got the slides will appear down here. And if I was to add a new slide, just drop any slide in here. Then that is going to be there. You'll be able to see the list of all the slides down the side. But there's also this menu here, View, where you could hide that navigator if you want, if you don't want to see that. Or you could just show the slide only. So these are the different views. So it hides that. Light table basically is good for arranging. If you've got a whole deck of slides and you want to sort of move stuff around, then you can use that deck view there. And then outline is just going to show you basically the outline of the presentation without showing the little thumbnails, basically. So I tend to use the navigator view generally when I'm just sort of working. The other views, though, that you can have is if you come down to this one, show object list. This is one that I find really useful. And that basically shows you everything that you've got in the slide. So let's just come back to this one. You can see here, if I put this object here, so I'm now covering the title with this object. So that's a rectangle. We've got the title here. This one here, which was the subtitle. I'll just write in subtitle so it's clear. So there we've got the title, the subtitle, and the rectangle. So this thing here, though, acts a bit like, it shows you what things are like in terms of layers. So what something that is in the top is going to appear at the top of the stack, and therefore is going to be covering everything below it. So if I just drag this rectangle down to the bottom, you'll notice that the text on screen now appears above the square. So if I just drop that, you'll see how now the text has sort of moved to the front. You can also just click on any of these items and adjust them as well. So if I click on the square and then right click, you can bring things to the front, send to the back, and that kind of thing. So if I press bring to the front, you'll notice that over here, it's going to jump to the top. So you can order things that way as well. So that's just in terms of how you sort of arrange things on the screen. But this one I find really useful, especially when you're building out complex things with animations where things are naturally going to be sort of covering each other up. If you're just doing a sort of regular presentation where you've got a title and bullet points or something like that, maybe this isn't so crucial. But I find I use this all the time when I'm doing things that have got different shapes, different graphical elements, and things like that on the screen at the same time, where you need to be very conscious about what is in front of what else, basically. So yeah, that's in terms of the layout. The way that I tend to use this, just generally, would be looking something like this. You've got things up in the menu bar up at the top, so there's various different buttons up here. You can always edit this. I've tended to stay with the default. There's just one button that I have added, which is there's a play button here, which plays the slideshow full screen. But I've added this one here, play in window, because generally, coming back to the Ecam Advanced series, and I'll also leave a link in the description, or have left one in the description, to another video I did on my channel all about creating immersive presentations using this with Ecam Live, going into Zoom and things like that. So I've left a link to that in the description. But to bring Keynote presentations into Ecam, I would always be playing them in a window and then share that window into Ecam. So I won't go through that specifically today because I've done that in previous videos. But this play in window button you can add into the top here, and you can change this toolbar just like with most apps here. You can click on Customize Toolbar, and it will bring up a whole series of other buttons that you can potentially add in there. And there is this one here that says play in window. So if you do want to add that into the top, you just literally drag and drop that button up there. So obviously you can do all of these things from the menu bar. So any things that I'm talking about today, usually you'll be able to find them in the menu bar as well. So in fact, the play button here, you can choose the default, whether you want it to play in full screen or play in window. And in that respect, when you do the play slideshow, Command Option P, then that would just default to whichever you've set there. So you can also do it that way as well. So that is it in terms of just sort of the overall layout. So let's have a look at how you go about adding some things in here. So in terms of what you can add into, well, in fact, actually, let me take it one step back. There is a slide master, as you may be familiar with if you've used PowerPoint before. So that's basically a way for you to create some initial templates that you can basically just drop your content into afterwards. And in order to get to the slide master, you'll need to make sure that you've not got anything in the scene selected. So as I've now selected this box here, you can see we've got the formatting is relevant to that box. If you click anywhere out of there, then you'll see that the inspector changes, and now we're changing things specific to the slide. So you can show the title and body and things like that are on there. You can also add in a slide number, and these are all part of the sort of template that we're using. Then the background, you can change from a standard background. So at the moment, this is a black background. Let's just change the color fill, though. You could change that to a graduated fill, or anything like that as well. So you can see that's more of a graduated fill, or add in your own image or something like that. You may want to do that if you've got a specific stylized slide background that you want to use. If you are going to do that, rather than do that on a slide-by-slide basis, you would want to do this in the slide master. And in fact, that goes for all of these things. Even just for color fills, you'd likely want to have the same thing propagated throughout. So you'll notice that now I've changed it in here. If I go to the next slide, we're back to that black background. So really, you want to be doing this on a global basis, so it's applying to all slides. So the way to do that is, now that we're sort of clicked out, we are adjusting the slide. Down at the bottom, edit slide layout. this is now showing as the slide master. And you'll see that there's a whole load of slides that have now appeared here. These aren't actually slides, these are the slide masters. So these are the different types of layout that are in this particular theme. So when we chose that initial template, that theme right at the beginning, these are all the sort of pre-defined slide layouts that it's got in there. So a main title, here's one with an image, you've got an image to the side and different text. So all these things like text, title text, body level, and all of that kind of stuff, those are just different things. So if I was to go into this one, for example, let me just come out of the slide master. If ever you want to exit that, just click down here where it says done at the bottom. So when I click on add slide at the top, you'll see that I've got all of those different templates to choose from. And so that was the one that we were just looking at. Double click to edit the title. That's where we've got our title. And then this was where it was saying body before. And so that is basically going to add in these different things, different sort of bullet points, basically. But that's obviously just their sort of built-in stock template. You'll be probably, I guess, wanting to create your own so that you've got a consistent look and feel that is in line with your own branding and things like that. So you can go and obviously edit all of these, and then once you've edited them, you can save them as your own template. So just to come in to show you how you would go in and edit all of these, like you might not need many of these. Let me just delete some of them. So if I just delete, you'll see that those delete easily. If you try to delete any slide where you've got a slide in your slide deck that is using that template, so here we've just added a slide using this particular template. If I try to delete this slide here, it's going to pop up and say one slide is currently using this layout. Which layout would you like to use instead? So let me just change that to blank. Click on choose. So it's allowed me now to delete that template. And if I go back to my slide, you'll see that it's replaced that with just a completely blank slide. If you had got text with formatting on, it would try and copy that all over to the right place. So I'll just delete some of these other ones though. We've also got one with that in, so I'm just going to delete that as well. And in fact, I'm going to delete all of these. I'll leave that one because we've got one like that. You can change the title though. So you could change the title of what each of these slide types are like. And you may want to have slides with different colored backgrounds, for example. So let's just say we're going to use something that's completely plain, but we want to have a couple of options in terms of the background. So here, maybe I want to have one that is a blue background. Then you can just come over here and exactly the same as you can do with the main slides. Note down here that we are editing a slide layout. You'll see this little blue banner at the bottom, which sort of shows you that you are editing a layout. So I can come over here and just change the color fill, change that to, let's just say blue. Let's make it nice and easy and clear. And then I could just come in here and add a new slide. Whoops, if I just duplicate this one, and then we'll change this one to red, just make it nice and bold and clear what we're doing. So then we've got a red slide. And then you can add in like text overlays and things like that. So if I add in the text here, you can add in places where you want to have these in the slide as a template, and I can make all the adjustments to the text using the text edit functions here. So in here you can change things like obviously the font, the size. You've got things like shadow. We'll look at this in a little bit more detail in a moment. But one thing you're going to do is if you're creating master slides, any text that I put on here is, as a default, it's just going to be text that will appear sort of embedded on the in the background of your slides. So what you need to do is if you want this to be editable, so that you can basically, you're creating a master where you want to just be able to have it show up, and then you can adjust it on a slide-by-slide basis. So like if this was going to be our main heading, for example, and then maybe this one down here was going to be our bullet points, like that. Then you want to just come down to where it says style, down at the bottom here, define as text placeholder. So that is then going to mean that every slide that shows up in, that will actually be a placeholder text. And what I mean by that is if I click on done and I click on add new slide, and I'll choose this red one, you can see that now is editable. So we can add in whatever our heading is. So that's how you go about sort of creating those placeholders and creating the templates. Obviously, this is a bit garish. But let's take it. In fact, let me just change that just so that it's not quite so intrusive. I'll come in and change that to, I'll change it to a darker blue just so that it differentiates it from the background, but it is a bit clearer and not quite so bright and in our face. So I've edited the slide layout master, and you'll see that that has updated those two slides that we're using, that particular slide template. Okay, so if I just get rid of this one, just so it's not quite so bright, let's talk then about actually how to add things to the slides and how to build things up and sort of format them as well. So I am starting effectively with something completely blank rather than those placeholders. So the different things that you can add in are basically all going to be up here. So you can add in tables, charts, text, shape, or media, and we'll come on to that in a moment. So let's start with text. That's the simplest one. Click on that. You'll see it's just going to add in some text with the default font. You can change the text in a number of ways. Hold down Command, Shift, and plus and minus is going to actually increase the size of the font slightly. So if you ever want to just make sort of slight changes, that can be used to sort of resize things up and down. You've got formatting over here. As you've added a text element into the screen, you'll see over here that we've switched over to the text section. So you can change things like the font here, of course, and then you can change the size. Let's just make that nice and big so that we can see. There we go. Text color, all standard sort of paragraph formatting. I don't think I need to go through all these, but left justified, right justified, centered, and so on. The position it is in the text box, that's worth mentioning probably. So if you have got a text box of a certain size, and then you are typing something in here, then you can change the way that that is basically sort of structured. So there it is aligned to the center. If I was to align to the top, then as I type, you should see that it will sort of drop down. Can you see how the top is staying the same now, and the text is sort of coming down from the top? Whereas if that was aligned to the bottom like that, then it would be the opposite, that as I type, you see it's building up from the bottom. So that's just the alignment. That's more of an issue when you are, like this, where if I'm adding the text in. So maybe I've got my title at the top. And then maybe I want to just hold down the Option key to drag. That's an easy way to duplicate. And if this was my sort of body text, like this, then I don't want it sort of going up over the thing above it. So in that case, I would make sure this was aligned to the top, like that, and then as I type, it's just going to drop down below it. So that's where you might want to use something like that. So that's the sort of formatting that you've got there. You can change things like the spacing, so line spacing here, whether you want it to, double spaced. You can see here what that's doing. Or just do it yourself. So 1.5 times, 1.1 times, and so on. Change the paragraph and all that kind of thing. Bullets, if you are going to have bullet points coming on screen, you can choose the type of bullets you want. You can choose the indent of the bullet. You can choose the indent of the text. Let me just align this to the other side. It might make it a bit easier to see what's going on there. So yeah, you're adjusting there the indent of the bullet. Whereas if I adjust this one, I'm adjusting the indent of the text. Relative to the bullet. Maybe that's because of the size of it. Let me just try this. Oh, there it is. Yeah, it's just because the text is so big. It seems to have to put an exceptionally large amount. There you go. You can see what's happening there. It's the spacing between the bullet and the text. And then you can change the format of the bullets and all of that kind of thing. I won't go through all of those. Hopefully that should be obvious just where to find that. Size of bullet and all that kind of stuff. There's also some other formatting from a text perspective, though. So there's this little cog icon here. So if you want to add things like drop shadows, you just move this over so you can see. If you want to add things like character spacing, so that's the spacing between the actual letters. The baseline, that's whether it's more sort of superscript or subscript. And then there's the baseline there. You can just set, either superscript or subscript. Capitalization, so whether you want everything all caps, small caps, just title case, i.e. the first letter, first character of every word is title, is in capitals. So that is where you can change those. Ligatures, the way that the things are joined up. Outline and shadow, so you can add an outline. You can see what that's done if I just increase the size. That is an outline of the actual text itself. Maybe make that just red so you can see it better. That's putting a text around the individual characters themselves. Shadow is going to be a drop shadow on the text. So if I just increase the offset a little bit, it should make it more pronounced. And we can change the sort of blur on it. So you can see what that's doing, dropping some shadow behind there. And then you can change the angle of the shadow. That should be obvious what's happening there if you look at the text on screen. And then text background, so you can add a specific background to the text. Now, in terms of the borders, we've added border to the characters themselves, but I'll just take that off for the moment because it looks a bit ridiculous for a start. There you can see that background that I put on. Let me just take that off as well. Text background. So I'm just going to put none. If you add the background, but you can see what it's doing. It's just putting a background behind the actual text itself. So I'll come down here and I'll change that to this one, i.e. no background. That's got rid of that. But there is also formatting of the actual box itself, of the text box. So this is where you're changing the style of the actual text itself. But the element on screen, which is the text box, there we need to just come into this style tab. And here you've got the fill. So if I put a color fill now, you'll see that it's actually the whole box that's changed there. And then you can add a border. So that's the differentiation there between the actual background and formatting of the text itself versus the text element. Hopefully that's all obvious. Drop shadow, so the same as we added a drop shadow to the text itself, here you can add a drop shadow just to the entire box. And make all the different changes to formatting, things like that. One thing that might catch you out sometimes, it still catches me out all the time, is when you're editing colors. So for example, here we've got, if I just go back to this, here we've got a color fill for the actual box of this blue. Then down here, we've got the line of the border. Let's just change that to something garish and obvious, pink. There we go. So we've got a pink border now. And then we've obviously got the text, which I've just mentioned. You know, you can change the text in the text settings here. So that is down here where it says text color. So here we might have, whatever color text we've got. So when you are wanting to change the color of something, it's important to note this little color wheel here. And here you can see it's sort of grayed out. If I want to edit the color, you can come in here and just pick one of these sort of more or less sort of primary colors, the main colors. But if you want to pick a specific color, then you need to click on this color wheel. And when you do that, it's going to open up the color picker here. Let me just change to this one. It's going to open up your standard Mac color picker. By the way, a lot of people don't use the Mac color picker as much. You might be familiar with seeing this. You've perhaps seen this bit down at the bottom here where you can just basically, any color that I pick, I can just drag and drop it onto one of these slots, and then I'm going to be able to easily get to that to remember it again. But a far more useful way to use this is if you've got different things that you're doing, you might want to create a specific palette for whatever it is that you're doing. So I've got in here, as well as this one, the sort of whatever you call this, rainbow wheel, you've also got this one where you can adjust colors based on the red, green, and blue. You can change it to CMYK or grayscale if you want to adjust things like that. Then over here, you've got these different palettes that you can create. But in this one here, this one in the middle, here is where you can actually create an entirely new, whoops-a-daisy, let me come into these three little dots, create a new sort of collection, if you like. So here it says, if we've just created a new one, it says unnamed, and then I can rename that. So let me just call this Keynote demo, like that. And then now we've basically got this area, I can add in whatever colors I want. So if I take the color picker, for example, and let's say that this blue here is one that I want to add, I can just add this into this area. So now we've captured that blue. Maybe I want to pick something out of somewhere else. I'll just grab something else off my screen and drag that in. And now we've created a selection of colors. You can obviously also, put it in your sort of brand colors as well. So you can click in any one of these and then you can basically change these to be, whatever your colors are. So, but what that means is that in this section, I now have here in this drop down a whole series of different palettes that I use for different things depending on what I'm working on. And so like this one, for example, has got some standard colors that I'm using here. I've got the, as it happens, the Ecam colors are all in here as well. So that's the Ecam color palette. And so it's a great way to just contain the selections. And what it means is that anytime you're in any specific app and you open up the color picker, you can have all of your brand colors to hand to do that. So in fact, let's just make this more Ecam branded, shall we? But this is a slight digression. The point was, when you are selecting the text color, for example, you want to make sure that if you are selecting the color of the text itself, if that's what you want to change, then make sure that you have got this little wheel here highlighted. So then I could change this to the sort of Ecam orange, for example. The background of this text box, though, if I want to change that, you see here how the color fill is not currently highlighted, neither is the border. And so if I was to come in here and just pick another color, it's not actually going to change what I think it's going to change. It's going to change the color of the text, because even though the text is not currently shown, we're not in that little sub palette there, it's still the thing that is actively selected. It still catches me out all the time. So you just need to make sure that you come over here, click on that one. So now we're adjusting the color fill, and then I could put in the Ecam blue in the background. And then if I come down to want to change the border, you just need to make sure that one is selected, and now I can change the border. So that's how you basically need to do that. That again looks rather terrible. So let me say I want to come edit the text color. So I'll just make the text white, make sure we've got it selected over here. And then I will just change that to white. You can change, as you can see that I've done there, I just got a particular word selected and it's changed just that word. So if you don't want to do that, just make sure you haven't got your cursor sort of in the text. Do you see how I made that look like it was intentional? It was an accident. But then you can come in here and just change the color again. So in fact, it's actually because we've got multiple things in there. Not let me do that. Okay. So now I can come and change this to white. Whoops. It's not letting me do that again. Yeah, because I'd got just one thing selected in there. So so that is the sort of editing of the text. I think I've pretty much exhausted all the things you can edit with text, but you're just a case of having a sort of play around in that. There is different more layout things in terms of paragraph layouts. I won't go through that. If you want to sort of organize things in columns and inserts and all of that kind of stuff, that is all in there. Now, the arrange is going to be looking at how you are arranging this in the screen. So here is where you can adjust things like the size and the height. So I just obviously dropped this text on. I sort of moved it around the screen, made it bigger, made it smaller, all of that kind of stuff just by dragging. But you can be really quite precise with it. So if you want this to be a specific size, width and height, for example, and the position, you can do that there. You can also add a rotation. So if you want to rotate this at all, you can do that. Obviously, you probably wouldn't be doing that with text, but it applies to text as it does with all the other layers as well. That thing of the order that things appear on the screen, you can right click to send things to the back. And you can obviously do it over here in the object tool. But also you can do that from the arrange section. So if you want to move something to the back, right to the back, you can do that. Move it right to the front, you can do that. Or if you just want to move it backwards by one step or forwards one step, you can do that as well. Aligning, so that's going to be aligning the things on the screen. So you can align multiple different things on the screen. In fact, an easier way to do that is if you come into the arrange menu up in the top. You've got all those same tools here, so send backwards and send forwards. But if I actually just select two things on the screen at the same time, and then come to the align, you'll see that if I align left, it's basically going to align those two elements on screen like that. And then you can also do that from the arrange menu. You can also distribute objects, so maybe that's easier to come to a little bit later. If I start talking about some shapes, because that might make some of this stuff make a lot more sense. I'm actually just going to get rid of this text for the time being, so I'm just going to delete it. And let's have a look at some of the shapes. In fact, before I do that, let me just have a quick check-in with the chat and see any specific questions. Well, I see the questions I will be covering later. So Marty, a couple of questions from you. the font size that you've got. Do you have a recommendation of the type and size of fonts that work best for you using when using slides on Google Meet? I don't necessarily have a specific size because it does depend on the font. The font sizes will be slightly different. But in terms of, like, if I was going to add some bullet points onto my screen in the same way that I did with those presentations, then, whoops, let me just do that. Incidentally, that is the Command Shift and then the comma and period is to zoom in and out. So if you want to zoom in and out of the slide, you can do that. But if I think of the sort of presentation styles that I do where I'm bringing stuff onto the screen, a bit like I did in Ecam Advanced, the title, let me just come back to here. And again, it does depend on the actual, it does depend on the typeface that you're using, but that might be more like 150. So for like a large title on screen, and then bullet points, if this was sort of a bullet. And I'll talk about layouts a little bit later on as well. So maybe that would be more like 80, something like that. Because, I mean, you can see that even that, it's probably depending on what you're what you're looking at this on right now. Yeah, depending on the device that you're looking on, yeah, even that on a phone, if somebody's looking at it on a phone as a full screen presentation, or even watching a Zoom thing on a screen, they will still be able to read that. And I suppose that's actually another point here is I'm not really talking so much about the presentation itself here. We're just looking at the functionality of Keynote. I would say that whenever you are giving presentations, that you should be the focus rather than the content. I'm still seeing so often people doing presentations where they've got, a whole paragraph of stuff up on the screen. And there are rare occasions where that is applicable. If there's some specific thing that you want to have up, like, a quote or something that requires it to have the entire text on there. But in general, the text that you have on your screen, whether you're using this for immersive presentations like in Ecam, into Zoom and Teams and things like that, or whether you are just giving a presentation on a stage, the bullet points should really just accentuate and sort of highlight the points that you are making. And also they should be introduced onto the screen at least after you have made the point. So another common mistake is people pull up a slide and it's got 5 bullets on it already, or 5 points or whatever it is that you're talking about, and then they go on to start working their way through them. But what that does is it actually causes a distraction, because people who are watching are going to be looking at at what's coming up. They're going to be reading that, and either you're going to have long bullets, which you shouldn't really, and then they're trying to read those, or that's going to have like these 1-word highlight or 3-word highlight bullet points that then they're already reading ahead. So this should all be sort of introduced onto the screen as you're talking about it, so that it does just sort of highlight that point. And there is I know that there's a school of thought that presentations shouldn't have words in it, as in shouldn't have text on screen. It should just have, images or things like that to sort of represent what you're talking about. I kind of disagree with that school of thought, because there are certain points where you actually want the thing that you've said to be, sort of remind people of it on the screen, so that it does sort of help to, burn it into their consciousness, shall we say, for want of a better word. And then obviously there's some things where you're demonstrating diagrams and whatever, where obviously you need things on the screen for that as well. So, but in terms of the font sizes, then I digress to get back to your point, Marty. That one is that I've got there. Let me come back to my screen. Wrong scene. There we go. You don't want to see that one. Let me change to this one. There you go. So that is kind of 80 point for that one in Helvetica. And then that title there is 150. And that's kind of like about what I would tend to have. Actually, that's probably a little bit big. So maybe that one's more like 100, just in terms of being able to fit a title on that's more than just title. So yeah, I don't really have a sort of fixed size that I use, because, as I say, it depends on the font that I'm using, and then also it depends on what I need to get onto the screen. Sometimes I may need to squeeze it, but that certainly is about a good size for people reading it on screen. I think that's probably a long way to answer that, but hopefully that does answer the question. So let me carry on now, and let's have a look at some shapes then as well. I'll just delete this text from here. Let's have a look at some shapes. you do have up at the top here chart. I'll sort of gloss over charts and tables. Hopefully that's self-explanatory. I'll just quickly show you though. You can add charts in here. You've got various different styles of charts that you can use, and then as soon as you drop one in, you can edit things in here. So the chart table, you've got the header and footer rows, so that's this row at the top. And then the columns, you can change how many columns you've got. So you can see how I'm just editing that there, and you can drop text in, choose the sort of formatting and all of that kind of stuff down here as well. So basically all the different sort of formatting options that you've got for text, you've got here, and then it's just got these extra things specific to the table, the cells, formatting of cells, border styles, all of that kind of stuff, the same as you would have in Excel, for example. So yeah, I won't spend too much time on tables. I am a data geek, but it's probably not appropriate to go into too much here today. Same with the charts. You've got various different types of charts that you can add in. And again, you'll have some specific things here that you can add in related to charts in terms of the axes, the series, the labels and all of that kind of stuff. And various different things that you can add in there. So I won't go into that too much because I think we could go down a big rabbit hole with that. So the next main one though, and the one that I use a lot, is shapes. And I use shapes for accentuating things on the screen, but also for some of those animated graphics that I used where things seem to be sort of sliding in from the left and right of the screen. Then those were all created with different shapes. So that is going to be up here, the shape menu. When you click on that, you're going to see some basic shapes here, so square, circle, and triangle and arrow. But you have actually got a whole load of them down here, and they are organized on the left-hand side into different sort of groupings. But as well as just general shapes, you'll see that there are, all kinds of little icons, avatars, that kind of thing down here. Avatars isn't the right word. Little icons that you can use. So yeah, some of those are going to be more useful than others. By the way, some of these ones here with these different symbols, I mentioned about creating icon packs for Stream Deck. This is a great way to create little graphics and things. And so you might even find that there are some sort of already made little icons here or pictograms that you can drop into your square slide to export to become a Stream Deck button. So yeah, there's lots of different ones in here. If you do add one in, I'll just start with a basic one. So we'll add a square. Then I mentioned before that you've got the basic ways to edit this in over here. So we can still add text to shapes, by the way. So if you do add a shape in, you can always add the text to it as well. But then in this one, arrange, this is where you're going to select things like the size and the position. So you can be very... Look at that, 666. That's where it landed on. But you can change that to whatever you want. So this is coordinates from left and right. So X coordinate is how far it is from the left-hand side. Y coordinate is how far down it is from the top. And that's always going to be for the upper left corner, basically. So relative to that. So it's showing you the position of that spot there relative to the top corner. And then the size here, you can obviously change the size to be whatever you want. At the moment, the proportions are not constrained. So if I make that, say, 1,000 or 100, you can see how now that's a rectangle, but I can still come in here and just change it any way that I want. If you want to lock something so that it's the same sort of proportions, you can just come to this one here, constrain proportions. So again, we're in the format, arrange, and then just down here, constrain proportions. So if I do that, then as I just drag this, the only way I can do it is it's going to keep it exactly the same sort of shape as it was before. So that's quite useful sometimes if I'm creating little diagrams or things like that on screen and I want to have these little elements that are always going to stay the same size. You can do it that way. Lots of different shapes though, as I've said. So if I come in here and just drag some other shapes in here, I'll add a little circle. It's going to default to this blue color, but I can come into the style and then change that. So let me just change that to red just so that it stands out a little bit more. We'll make this like this color. And then let's just add a couple more as well. Triangles. The triangle one, you may want to sort of flip the orientation of it. So again, in the Arrange tab, you do have some more tools there, as well as the size and position. And you've already seen the rotate that we did before. There is these two options here to flip. So if you want to flip it horizontally, you can see what that's doing. And then there's also flip vertically. So now you can see what effect that is happening, what effect that is having. There are times when you may want to sort of combine shapes or actually create your own shape out of these. So let's just do something a bit stupid. If I just, I'm going to unlock that one. Let's make a little house, shall we? Why not? So I'm going to rotate this one like that. So I'm going to make myself a little silly little house. I swear that my graphic design skills are better than this, but I'm just going to do this on the fly. There we go. Let's say that I want to actually make that a shape now. I'm happy with that as my house, and I want to join those together. You can actually combine different shapes, and you can subtract them as well. We'll look at all of those. So if I come up into the format, I'm sorry, into the, 1 second, where am I looking now? I've just lost it for a moment. Hang on a minute. There we go. So it is in the format, and then in shapes and lines, you've got these 4 options down here. So unite shapes, intersect, subtract, or exclude. So when you unite shapes, you're basically joining them together. So if I click on unite shape, you can see that now that's now just become one single shape, and then I can resize it. I might want to just resize this like that, and you can see that because I haven't constrained proportions, I can resize it anyway. But it is all acting as one shape, and they were 2 different colors before, but now they're one color because they are just effectively acting as one single shape. You can also subtract shapes. So let's say I want to put a little square window in it, and that's now behind, but I want to actually bring that to the front because I want to take it away from what's behind. So I'm going to bring that to the front, and let's put a little small window there. So now if I click this one, and I'm going to highlight the one behind, and then I'll go to format, shapes and lines, and then this time I'm going to subtract shapes. So that's now subtracted that little red round triangle, round triangle. That's now subtracted that red circle from that shape. So you can see that there's actually a hole in it. You can see through to what's behind. Maybe I should zoom in a little bit more. The other one you can do is if I go to shape, and I'll add another shape in here. This is going to start looking ridiculous now, but I'll just change the style of that so you can see this shape now. You can also, if I go to format, shapes and lines, I need to select at least 2 to do that. Format, shapes and lines. You've also got intersect shapes. And what that's going to do is that's basically going to combine the 2 shapes where they are overlapping. So in fact, the overlapping part here is just this little square, isn't it? So if I click on here and go to intersect shapes, you can see what's happening. It's basically just showing me the only part where they are left overlapping. I should just point out, yeah, Rich is saying that's looking great. And as a former architect, that's probably not an example of my best work, I should have to say. Get my things. I swear I've designed nicer houses than this before. Anyway, so yeah, intersect is basically where the 2 join over. So maybe a better example of that would be like, if I get a shape like this, I'll make that one yellow. I'll make this one here red. And now if I intersect those 2, it'll be a bit more obvious what it's doing. Format, shapes and lines, intersect. You can see it's basically just the bit of the 2 where they overlap. The opposite of that then is if you do format, shapes and lines, and then you do exclude shapes. That's now basically, it's going to cut out the bit where they were overlapping. So with these, I'm just laughing at your comment, Michael. Yeah, I need to sort out a few. I'll be honest, there's a few design flaws with this particular house. So that is the ways that you can actually basically modify shapes and create your own shapes. You can also get a lot more sort of detailed with it as well. If you click on any shape and right click and then click on make editable, basically then that's going to put a series of points all over the shape where you can really edit it. So if I wanted to, for example, give it a nice Thai style sloping roof, I could bring this out here. If I want to drag this in like that, and then we've got this little node just there. I'll bring that out. So maybe something like that. And then if you want to add in new points, if you're just dragging these, it's going to sort of drag the edge. So you'll notice anytime I hover over a line, it pops a little line in at the midpoint, just there. And that is for basically moving the sort of bending the line, if you like. You can also always press the Option key and add a new one in. And you can also change whether it's a sharp point. So a sharp point being like that, you can see that's now completely straight. Or whether it is going to be a smooth point, which is going to be more one that as you move it, it's going to cause the thing to curve. So actually with that, you can make a lot of changes and design something a lot better than my little effort there. You can also edit any of the existing shapes as well. So if you go into the Shapes menu, and then if you, for example, want to go into something like this, one of these others, whatever it happens to be, and then make it editable, you can just click on any one of these random ones. I don't know why I chose that one, but there you go. You can edit any of these as well. So just click on here, make editable, and then you can change all of that however you want to. If you have got a perfect shape, just like this one, you can also click save to my shapes. Not shaving anything. Save to my shapes like that. And then when you do that, if I just do it, then when you got to shapes, down at the bottom, you'll see my shapes and you'll have a picture of it there. You can see the last time that I actually demonstrated this, I created a donut. I don't know what my mind was on that day. But anyway, so that is how you add shapes and work with shapes in here. I've actually created a Stream Deck icon pack just for Keynote, because when you're doing all of these things and you're trying to create graphics, then having to go up here to the menu here and the format and shape and all of these and click through all these, it can be a little bit time consuming. So what I did was, what's the best way to show you this? If I put this over onto this scene, I'm going to change over to here. And then I will change to my Keynote Keynote icon pack. So here I've just got some basic shapes. So if I press these buttons here up along the top, it's going to automatically add in those different icons. Then these ones are basically center front, center back, bring forward, bring backwards. Then you've got here, these are the ones that we've just looked at. So intersect shapes, subtract shapes, and those other ones. And you can see the little graphic sort of shows what it's going to do. These are the ones for sort of flipping horizontally and vertically. And you've got the ones here for alignment. So align everything to the top, to the middle, to the bottom. Distribute. So I'll show you distribute in a moment, actually, but that's what those are for. And then this one here is for grouping. And then you can also lock different layers as well. And then these are for play slideshow. So that basically is how I control my Keynote. And it actually really speeds up the flow of doing all of this. If I come back to, whoops, wrong one. That's a bit zoomed in on my fat head. So if I use my Stream Deck to activate these, then yeah, it's a lot quicker to just be able to sort of drop in a shape like that, drop in another shape. I can join those together just by clicking a button on my Stream Deck. Now those are joined, he says, pressing the wrong button. No, why is that not working? Do you know what? I think it might be my keyboard maestro playing up. Anyway, you get the idea. So that it just sort of speeds up the sort of process. I'll just come back to here and I'll drop a link into that. You can get those from my store. Incidentally, I have set this up so that it does work with Keyboard Maestro, so that basically it will work by activating the menu items, because the way keyboard, you can do this by setting up a keyboard shortcut specifically for the align, where is it? Shapes and lines, these ones. You'll notice that there's no current keyboard shortcut associated with them. So for Stream Deck to work, you would need to assign a keyboard shortcut to it. But the way that I do this is so that I'm not creating a whole load of keyboard shortcuts that are then taking up that space on my list of keyboard shortcuts. I use Keyboard Maestro to basically assign those actions to a particular button. It's all explained in a video that I did about this plugin. This icon pack for Stream Deck, and you can find that on the store along with it as well. So you can check that out before you get it, if it was something that you wanted. But yeah, it certainly just speeds up my workflow in terms of creating these things. I'll just talk about something that I mentioned then, which was distribute. So if you've got different things on the screen, like this. Or in fact, let me just make them all the same size. Let's say I wanted to create a nice little layout with a series of boxes on it. Obviously, I can try and line these up. You will see that you get these little arrows on either side of it. So when it's positioned in the center, it sort of snaps into place. So it is going to find the place where it is centered. I can drag this one across as well, and it will snap when it's at the same point. So you can see the little arrows that appear on the screen to show that it is in the same place. But a quicker way to do it is, if you have got all of these things, especially with the stream back button, is if you come into Arrange, Align Objects, and you've got this one. So center, if I want to align them all to the top. So now they're all at the top. They're still not spaced out equally though. So then I can come to Arrange, Distribute Objects, and then Distribute Horizontally. And that has now just organized them. So that's great if you're bringing text onto the screen and you want to make sure you've got all your things lined up. Then using those two tools, the Align tool and the Distribute, then that is going to make sure that they are sort of all nicely spaced. If you're not doing something where they're horizontal, maybe you want something like that. If I do Arrange, Distribute, so you can either do horizontally or vertically, but you've also got this one evenly, and you'll see what happens. That's basically going to just arrange them from the far top right or far top left to the far bottom right. It will just arrange them in that equally space them in both directions. Hopefully that makes sense. So there we've got a few different elements on the screen. So let's have a chat about animations, because that's something that obviously the thing that spurred this whole live stream on was the presentation I did on Ecam channel for Ecam Advanced, talking about bringing things in and out of the screen for immersive presentations and animations. So that would be, we've looked at all these sort of formatting options for different things over here. We've looked at the Arrange and so on. So then the next inspector here is this one, which is Animate. So if I click on that, you've got various different ways that you can animate the elements that you've got on screen. And there's 3 different types of animation. There is either a build-in, which is the way that something appears onto the screen. You've got the opposite of that, which is build-out, which is how it exits the screen. And then you've also got this one, Action, which is something that's it's gonna do in terms of animate itself whilst it is already on the screen. So it's probably easier to sort of display this. No problem. Just noticed the message. No problem. It's available on replay as well, so you can still use the same link. So we're a little bit through, but yeah, have to catch the replay. So yeah, for the animation purposes though, if I come over to here, let's just add a build-in for this. And here you've got a selection. I'm not going to go through all of these, but actually as you just go down them, you can preview them. So a fade in, you can see what's happening. This is the element on screen that we're looking at. So fade and scale, trace, you can see it sort of traces the shape. Anvil falls down in a little puff of dust. And you've got all these other ones. So ones that I tend to use, because you can go really overboard with this, and I'll show you an example of that. Like if I do fireworks, for example, it will just appear on screen in a flash of fireworks. Flame, there we go, that's what's happening there. Flashes, light bulbs, lens flare. I would say use animation sparingly. Some people go way too overboard with the animations, and it's great to make a point about some things and highlight some things. But if every single thing that you have coming on the screen is doing something like this, yeah, it's probably going to look a little bit too much. So I do tend to try and use the more subtle of the animations. I think animations are good rather than just something suddenly appearing on the screen, because it does sort of highlight the fact that something's coming in and draws people's attention to it momentarily. But I would tend to use things like this one, fade and scale. I tend to like that one just because it's sort of coming on. It's quite subtle. There's a little shine that goes across it as it comes up. Then there would be fly in if something's going to just move in from the side. Wipe would be another one that I sometimes use depending on what it is. And these are running quite slowly at the moment. I'll show you how you can adjust the time in a second. But yeah, some of these other ones I tend not to use, like these ones, popping, scale big. That's the opposite. That's quite useful. Something if you want something to appear big on the screen and drop down, I do use that one. But yeah, some of these other like twisty ones and all that kind of stuff, not so much. In fact, let me come back to that fade and scale. And so you can preview them by hitting the little preview button next to them. If you want to actually select it though, hit on the actual text itself. And now what you'll see is we've got some settings for that particular animation. So here we've got the duration. So it's set to 2.5 seconds. If I make it quicker and then I just preview, you can see that's now a lot quicker. The scale, so these things that you can change, these parameters, you just have to go through the different animations and see what parameters you've got. They are going to be slightly different for each one. So this one, because it has got this sort of scaling factor, you can change that. So we could change it to 14% and you'll see what happens there. It's going to come from a much smaller size on the screen, whereas if I start from the scale larger, it's actually going to scale in, as you'll see. Like that. So you're adjusting here the sort of starting point of it. Shine was that little sort of shimmer that goes across the top of it. So I can turn that off. There it's got no shine on it. So that's the sort of adjustments, but there will be different adjustments for different ones. So you just have to go through and have a look at those. One of them that you may notice, if I just come to this one where it's fly in, this is a common thing that you might want to have, or let me say, not that one. Hang on 1 second. Maybe it is. I was looking for something else there. Move in. Yeah, that one. So this one, you'll notice that there is this little bounce thing. I tend to turn that off. I find it a bit annoying. But if you watch when I preview it, it sort of comes in and then there's a little sort of bounce to it. So you can turn that one off. Preview it again, and it just comes straight in from the side. So I tend not to like those sort of bouncing things. I'll come and change it again. And we will do the fly in. In fact, no, come to this one. Set the one we had before. Okay, so I've got an animation there. Let me just go and apply that to all of these others as well. Unfortunately, you can't copy and paste an animation style to others, but you can highlight multiple things at once here and then click on Add Effect. And I'll just make those, where was it, fade and scale as well. And we'll change that to the same sort of time. Like this. Okay, so now basically we've got these 4 things that have all got an animation associated with them. But as it is at the moment, looking at this, it's not immediately obvious where these are. And in fact, let me just come here and rename these. I'm going to call this rectangle, or in fact, let me change the colors of them to make it more obvious. Just for the purpose of this demonstration, it will make it more clear. So, right, you can see here we've got these 4 rectangles. At the moment, they're all called rectangle rounded. So it's not helpful that they've all got the same name. So I'm going to call them, just so it's obvious, yellow, green. So you can change the names of these things. This is another reason why I find this little inspector on the side useful, because it means that you can make these things all very clear, especially when you've got multiple shapes that are the same, effectively the same name. You want to change them to something different. So here you'll see that I'm going to call them yellow, green, red, and blue. This will make more sense in a moment, because at the moment you can't really see what is going on in terms of the order of the animation. Now, if I play in a window, and then this is the slideshow, title is just there automatically because there is no animation associated with it. Whereas if I click on the button now, you see it's just basically animating these things in. So you can see what's happening there, and that's happening on click. But you may want to automate more of this and actually have more adjustment over when these things come on the screen. So in that case, if you come back over to the animation window, or inspector, I should say, and then click on this build order down at the bottom, this is where you can actually organize the, what's happening in this animation. So here you can see it's basically pulling in the name of the layer. So that's why it's useful to be calling these, giving them a reasonable name over here, because when you come to do your animations, you'll find that it's a lot clearer to be able to see the order that these things are happening in. So the default is always going to be that, the default is always going to be that these are going to happen on click, i.e. when you click the mouse, when you're playing the presentation, or if you've got a sort of presentation remote like this to advance slides, then that's how these animations are going to advance. You can sort of chain these together though. So if you come down to the bottom here, instead of having it on click, you can hit here and say with build 1. And by the way, you'll see these numbers down here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the build numbers. So each of these different animations is called a build. It's either building in or building out or whatever. So here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I've now selected the second one here, and you can have it happen with build 1. So it's going to happen at the same time. Or you could have something happening after build 1 or 2. So I'm going to have that one happening after build 2. You'll notice as well that it's clear that these are sort of linked because they've now got they're sort of joined together almost, whereas this one's still sitting out on its own. So I've set these two to go together. This one is going to go immediately after that one, and then this one is going to go when I click the mouse. So just to sort of show you how that looks then, what that's doing, is if I play this slideshow again, I'm going to advance the slide once. You'll see that those two come on at first, then the green one comes automatically, but the yellow one doesn't come until I actually hit the button for it to come on the screen like that. So let me just come back out of that. So that is the way that you can structure these things. So if I go to build order, you can also, I'll just keep this over here so you can kind of see it at the same time. We've looked at the build, the things sort of coming onto the screen. You can also have them do things after they've come on the screen or whilst they are on the screen. You can have them do things then as well. So if I come over to the action, you can add an effect. And here you might want something to rotate. So there you can add, how much you want it to rotate by. Let's say, well, let's leave it like that, in fact. Have it rotate 45 degrees. This one, ease in and out. That is whether you want something to just move from sort of one position to another, and it's going to go from that place to the other place in that certain amount of time. Or if you have this ease in and ease out, it's going to sort of start to accelerate as it moves and then sort of slow down when it gets to the end. Maybe it's easier if I show you. So this one has got ease in and ease out on. So if you watch this shape when I do it, you'll notice that it kind of like speeds up and then it slows down towards the end. So if I preview, that's that. It's maybe I need to make this a bigger distance, 270, so you can see this in more detail. And maybe speed the time. So I'm changing the time here. It's kind of like increasing it. You maybe can't see it on that. It's probably more obvious on things that are moving in and out of the screen. But if you turn this off, then basically it's just going to start and just move at a constant speed. See how that's just like a constant speed of rotation, whereas this one is easing in and out. It's got that acceleration and deceleration on it. So it just sort of smooths things out. When you've got things coming onto the screen as well, sometimes having that ease in and ease out is useful, so that something, rather than just sort of appearing on screen and stopping abruptly, it appears on screen and then sort of comes to a stop slowly. So that's what that is essentially, in case there is any confusion. So I'm going to leave that. You'll notice that as I've added this new animation, this new action here, it's also appeared there. Maybe we might want that to happen immediately after this one. You can just drag and drop it, and that will just set it to after that build. You can also add a delay in. So if you want it to happen after that build there, but you also want there to be a bit of an extra delay of, let's say, maybe 2 seconds. So now if I play this slideshow, what we've essentially added is I click the button once. Those two things will appear. The other one will appear automatically. It's going to wait for me to click. And when I click, the yellow one will appear. It's going to wait for 2 seconds. And then the blue one is going to do whatever we'd set to that to rotate. This is all ridiculous in terms of what this animation is doing, but hopefully it's demonstrating the sort of process. Annoyingly, the build order window disappears every time you start the slideshow. So if you're trying this out and you come back out of the slideshow, you do have to click this build order again to get it back up. So we've looked at the build in and we've looked at the actions on screen. Let's now look at the build out. And this is all the sort of theory. I just noticed, Mark, your comment there. Can you show a finished item like Ecam Advanced and then identify the elements and how it was created? I certainly will do that. So this is all the kind of theory. Once I've finished this animation section, I will bring up my Ecam Advanced one and you'll see what I was doing with that. So then if I come back to the build out, where's it gone? Let me take that comment down, sorry, there we go. The build out then is effectively how things are going to move off the screen. So let's just say we want to select all of those and we want them to then move off the screen. If I click on build out up at the top here, then add an effect. And then all of the same things you've got there, having things disappearing whichever way you want. So let's just say that everything, just moves out. They've all got that little bounce thing in. So that's that little effect that they've got at the start. You can see how it's just automatically added those all into our build order. You might want those things to all happen at the same time. I'm just going to drag them up here. Whoops. Select those three. And I'm going to drag those on there. So those are actually going to happen after that previous build. Let's say that we want them to all happen with the previous build, but we just want to add a little bit of a delay in. So there's actually a slight gap between each one going out. And now let's play that. So if I now play this, we've got those two coming in. The other one comes in automatically, waits for a second. When I click the button, that one will come on. It'll wait for a second and spin the blue one round. And then when I click my mouse button again, then they'll all go off one after another with that little delay in. So you can create some really sort of complex animations with this. In fact, I wonder if I've got... I used to have an intro on my channel. Let me see if I can just open this up, actually. I used to have an intro on my YouTube channel. So at the start of every video, it had this little Take One Tech animation. I since dropped it because nobody's here to watch a stupid animation. But I will just show you how that was made, because I did do that in Keynote as well. Let me see if I've got that, because this is can show you sort of the level of things that you can do in terms of the transitions. So 1 second, let me just bring this up. Maybe I'm not going to be able to find it, of course. Of course I'm not, when I'm just wanting to find it. That probably is the one. Yeah. Right, I'll get this up because this will show you the, what you can do in terms of animations. So I had this little thing here. Where is it? I had this slide. It's got all of these different elements here. And actually, we'll come on to groups as well. I've not mentioned groups, but within Keynote, you can group things together. And then if I look at the animation here and do build order, you can see that this is doing a whole series of things. So this is this animation. It's also playing audio, and then it's animating these groups. And actually, the way that this all looks when it runs together was like this. So I had this thing spiraling in the background. My little animation came on. These are all just builds. So it's all built in Keynote builds. And then the thing would drop out. So maybe if I just play that full screen. And in fact, this was on a transparent background. This was all on a transparent background. And so this would fade to being able to see through to my image underneath it. So that was how I created that, was just as a, as I say, just as a an animation in Keynote. That is a move spiraling round. As I say, just builds in little animations of moving things on screen. In fact, that's one that I didn't mention, so maybe it's useful to just mention that as well. If I come back to my other presentation here, as well as transitions for sort of moving in and moving out for the build in and build out. If you look at action when something is on screen, you can also do a move. And what that's going to do is, you can see here's the starting position, but we could move this up here. You could also add another move it down there, add another one, and just sort of chain these together. Whoops. Like that. And move these things around. You can also, when it shows you the line of the position that these are moving to, you can also drag the line to sort of change the shape of it. And then I could change the shape like this. You can hopefully see what I'm doing. I'm basically adjusting the path that this thing is going to fly, like that. I could come to this one here, adjust this path, adjust this path here. Maybe add a little rotate in there as well. Now, if I come to the build order, we've got these different things here. Now, if I just sort of chain these all together and do one after another, and then I preview this, you'll see how this is going to move on the screen. Whoops. In fact, I need to actually move that all the way up here, because this is before the build outs. You can see how that is just basically doing all of those different things. So that is how you can set up animations. I mean, this is all looking ridiculous, but it's hopefully demonstrating the sort of capabilities you have in terms of what you can do with animations. What you can do as well is, at the moment, we've just got these 4 things together. You might want to group shapes together. One thing to note is if you apply an animation to a specific object, and then you go and subsequently add it into a group of objects, and a group, by the way, is as simple as this. If I just add a new shape, you got these little squares here. You can see here, those are just showing up as 3 different squares. If I highlight all of those, I can go to right click and then click on group. And now they are a group. I can size that group together. And they are, whoops, do you know what? I think my power might have gone off. Let's see how long my UPS has. That's strange. I don't think it is. I think it's back on now. Never mind. There we go. Ignore that. So that is a group of shapes that applies to text and so on. And so you can then apply the animations to a group as well. So, but you can't apply it to individual objects within the group. So I can't come in here and apply to just that individual shape. But what I can do is I can select all of those, click on add an effect, and then I could add a shape there. So we can add that one in, and that's just going to effectively appear in our build order. And once again, there you can see it is group. Again, it's group appear, and then you can edit that as well. So that is the sort of process of creating the animations. Now, there is another really cool trick of Keynote, which is when you're transitioning from one thing to another. Now, let me just come in here and I'm going to duplicate this slide. So if I click on duplicate, and I'm actually just going to come in here, select all of these. And you'll notice that, by the way, as I select any one of these objects, it also highlights in the build order for the animation, it highlights wherever they are featuring in the build order. So if you say, right, well, actually, I want to just remove all of the animations associated with this one, I've clicked on it. Now they are all showing up in here. So I can just hit delete. And it's deleted all of the animations associated with that. I'm just going to delete in this slide all of the animations associated with all of them. So now there's no animations in there. And I want to show you the slide transitions because this is a big part of how I was doing what I was doing in the Ecam Advanced. So if I now, basically I've got this slide here, and if I click out of all of the objects, so now I'm just effectively editing or looking at the slide settings, and I'm going to go to the animation still, but you've got this transition effect, and this is transition between 2 slides. So here we've got a slide like this, and then we've got a blank slide. Then I go to add effect. You've got various different transitions here that you can do. So like blinds, for example, if I do preview, you'll see what that is. Color palettes, going to do that weird effect. Cube. So these are the transitions from basically one slide to the next. Incidentally, this little video that I've got running down here with my my course details and stuff like that, that is nothing more than a series of Keynote slides with the little thumbnails for all of my courses. And then I've got a transition, which is, which one is it now? It's not page flip. It's one of these transitions. I can't just remember now. It's difficult. Where is it? It's one of these ones. Fade through. It's not that one. This one, that's it. Yeah, we go. So that grid effect there is basically going to go to the next slide. So we've got, let's call this slide 1, slide 2, like that. So if I preview that animation, whoops, and which one was it? Grid. Yeah, you can see what that's doing. And you should see that that is very similar to what's going on right down there. So to create that little thing, somebody asked me in one of my videos, how did I make that? And that's what it is. So I exported the slideshow with a sort of fixed time, and that's how those are all staying on there and just sort of rotating. It's just a series of slides where I dropped my thumbnail into each slide and then exported it as a video. We'll come on to exporting in a moment as well. But I digress. So the effects, then you've got all these different types of effect that you can do to transition between slides. But the one that is really great and that I use all the time is this one called Magic Move. And what that does is if you select that transition, and by the way, you can change the different things here. So like the on click, or whether you want it to happen automatically, whether you want the slide to transition automatically after a certain time. And ease in and out, we'll come into that in a moment. But what Magic Move does is if I now duplicate this slide again, Magic Move basically looks for anything where you've got the same objects in one slide compared to another. So you'll see here, obviously, I've got these 4 shapes here, but I've also got those exact same 4 shapes in this slide. So what you can do is you just move these things around on the screen to where you want them. And this is actually really great for creating diagrams where you want to show like interactions between things. I use this all the time, aside from the animations, which I'll show you in a moment, just for when I'm wanting to show flow diagrams or like organization type things where you start with some points, they move and shift, and it adds something else onto the screen. Maybe I should demonstrate it before I try and explain it. So if I click on preview, you'll see that what's happening is it's because it's transitioning from this slide to this slide. When you actually play the Magic Move, what it's doing is it's going to automatically move those things on the screen. Then let's say the point of this was you were talking about these 4 elements that combine to make something else. Maybe that's this big thing here in the center, like this, and then maybe that is format. So make that a different color, and then you want to have this thing building in. So we'll come to animate, add an effect. Let's say we use our build in, add an effect, fade and scale. Incidentally, one of the ways that you can have something come in, I talked in the build order about how you have things happening on click after the next after the previous build, or with the previous build. There is also another option which is after transition, and that means when the slide transitions to the new slide. So if I change this build for this big pink circle to after transition, then if I play this, what you'll see is when it plays, it's going to do the Magic Move now to move those things out of the way, and then it's automatically going to bring in that transition like that. So that's another way that you can sort of speed up the process of actually moving things around on screen, because rather than having to use that move command to basically move, the red square down, the yellow square up, it just sort of simplifies it, because you're basically just going to move these things wherever you want them on the screen. So just to sort of highlight this again, if I duplicate this slide, you can also as well resize things. So I could resize this on the screen, move these ones over here, something like this. Again, all nonsense, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to do. Just to demonstrate, like this. And so now if I play this all together, play it in window, these are going to move. The other one's going to pop in automatically. And then when I do this, that one's... In fact, the reason why that one reappeared is because I'd left the animation on that one. So because it was animated here to come on screen, and because it's also animated to come on screen here, because I just duplicated the slide, that's why it didn't actually move. So what you'd need to do there is just click on the build order, just delete that animation on that particular slide. This is all really abstract at the moment. I'll show you a real world example so that it's not just moving around shapes. This is just demonstrating hopefully the sort of power. So there you go. You can see how that's all worked. Let me actually pull up how I use this then, and these things that I was talking about of creating these presentations. In fact, one more thing I'll talk about first before I do that, beg your pardon, is if I come up to here, the other type of element that you can add in screen. So we've looked at tables briefly, charts briefly, text, shapes. You've also got this one here, media. And in media, you can add in photos, movies, movie files, things like that, music, images, and so on. But there's this one here, live video. Now, if you click on live video, it's going to pull in a video camera that you've got connected to your computer. Now, wherever I am, if I click on there, if I go to the format, here you can choose you can change the sort of shape, borders, all that kind of stuff. You can see it's got a little reflection down there at the bottom, add borders, and all of that kind of stuff. You can add rounded corners. In fact, the rounded corners are actually in this section here. Live video, so you can add a rounded corner, the corner radius. So that's going to add a little rounded corner to that video feed. And then the mask, so you can change the size of it to be whatever, circle. And then you can also change the camera. So at the moment, it's just picking up my default camera, hello, which is this one, my top-down camera. But if I click on this one, you can add a video source. And then from here, you can choose the camera that you want. So actually, the one that I'd want would be this one, which is my main camera. And you can give it a name, main cam. So then you can click add. Incidentally, it may not recognize absolutely every camera that you've got connected. So one thing that Apple doesn't do is recognize or allow virtual cameras to be used in its apps. So you can't use your Ecam Live virtual camera to do a load of stuff in Ecam and then bring that into Keynote. Similarly, you can't use virtual cameras in QuickTime to create a recording in QuickTime using your camera. Virtual cam, same with FaceTime. That's why you can't use your Ecam virtual cam in FaceTime on the desktop. The others that don't show up, I mean, this one, now actually this is interesting because Camo camera is a virtual camera, so it's recognizing that one. That's interesting. Same with detail. I wonder why it doesn't recognize the Ecam virtual cam when it recognizes Camo. Anyway, I digress. I don't know about that. But it also doesn't recognize my, I've got a Canon EOS 60D coming in over USB, and it doesn't recognize that one either. So it just doesn't show up in this list. But you can, if you've got something with a capture card, it should just show up. So anyway, there we go. I've got my main cam, click on add, and now I've got my camera coming into Keynote. So this is completely separate to what's going on in Ecam right now. The one in the round circle, that is just a live video feed coming into Keynote, whereas the one that you're seeing over on the left-hand side of the screen, or right-hand side of the screen, is obviously the in Ecam. So you can bring video into Keynote. What that means is, though, you can actually add all of the same animation effects as you can add to things on screen, like the shapes and so on. You can add those animation effects here as well. So that means that you might want to animate this thing on screen. So if I click on Add Effect, and let's say we move in, or maybe fade and scale. Let's try that one. There you go. You see how it's got that effect on it. We could add an action here to rotate. So I could make myself rotate. Well, let's just do 360. And number of rotations. So if I preview that, if I want myself to rotate on screen. Again, I'm not necessarily suggesting you do this in your business presentations, but just to know that you do have these animation effects on. And then you've got build out as well, where you can add an effect and have it sort of move out. And that one's got this little bounce, so it's done a weird little thing there. But if I do the build order, it's got those 3 different effects on it. So if I was to play this particular slide, click on the button, I'm going to fade in. Click on the button again, I'm going to rotate. Click on the button again, I'm going to slide out. I'm not sure why it's doing that slightly weird thing. So that is just the fact that you can have live video in your scenes. So as I say, all of this quite abstract at the moment, but let's put that all together. And in fact, what I'll do is I'll open up the presentation that I did for the Ecam Advanced, and I'll just get that one open because you'll see how I've sort of put this all together then. So I'll open up this other one. Okay, right. So here what I've got is, you can see my my sort of slide deck, if you like, down here. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. So I wanted to, I did my countdown. There was an animation on my countdown. So I'm starting this, and then the actual countdown part of it was sitting just down here. That was done in Ecam. But everything else, for the main body of the presentation, I was actually using the live camera feed into Keynote. But then I was doing a screen share of the presentation in Ecam. So although it had my camera in it, it was actually coming in through the live video into Keynote, and then that was coming into Ecam. So these are the sort of slides that I had. So I had the magic move, because this one here has got this shape on it. Hopefully you can see that. It's got this shape, which is a little cutout of me. or a little cutout for me, I should say. Then it transitioned to this slide, and actually, that is the same shape, but I just scaled it up. So I'd scaled it from here, and then in the second slide, I'd scaled it up. So it basically comes over there like that. And that's what gave this little zooming effect. Maybe I should just demonstrate this rather than trying to explain what's happening. You just undo all of that. So if I click on play slideshow, play in window, it's going to ask me to start my live video. So do like that. So this was my sort of countdown scene over on the that side. And then I use the countdown, as I say, in Ecam. But now when I skip to the next slide, what you'll see is that this sort of overlay here expands. And so what the effect of it is that it looks like I'm getting bigger on screen. Incidentally, I also scaled up my live feed of my video. So watch what happens when I go to the next slide. It had that effect of it zooming in. It was actually just the thing moving sort of out to the outside the size of the slide boundary. So let me just end the slideshow a second. So you can see what I mean. This zooming effect was just created by that element there being made much bigger so that it was actually outside the bounds of the slide. Also, you'll see my live camera feed here is large, whereas in this slide here, it's much smaller. I also wanted a sort of slight transparency over. I wanted this slight blue transparency that sort of covered me up, so I wasn't like, it was more sort of the color of the back of the overlay. So I just created this little triangle here, and then when you go to the next slide, you'll see that that triangle has just basically moved out of the way. So layering up these different things, let me just undo all those little changes I've just made. I think that's got them all. So watch again for that little triangle move. If I click on play in window, so you see how I'm there's sort of a blue haze over the top of me there, whereas when I click the button, that blue triangle is moving out across the screen outwards that way. The other thing is zooming in, and my camera's zooming in. So that little intro transition, I had people asking how I'd done that, and that is how I'd done it. And that's also how I'd got, obviously, the camera to get bigger, because in Ecam itself, you can't zoom cameras. You can change the shape of them in one scene versus another, and then just transition with a sort of fade between them, but you can't do the animation of it. Okay, so once it's gone to this particular scene here, then I just basically automatically transition to this one, which just gets rid of that little overlay there. So it goes to this scene. And then this one, I wanted to just have this little lower third with my name come on automatically. So that one, I used basically just the animation transition that I've already talked about. And here we've just got a group, which happens to be that background. It's let me just zoom in on that. The group is basically just a little shape here with a blue background and a little orange strip down the side of it. That's what that group is. And that moves in from the side. We've then got my name, which flies in. And then the other thing that you can do is these all move in, and you'll notice that that moves in automatically after the transition. So after I had done the the countdown, it automatically, when I hit the button, it transitioned to me being full screen. It then transitioned to this screen, this slide automatically. And then the little lower third there, you see I mentioned before about this start after transition. That then moved in automatically. My name also came in after that had moved in. And then I wanted it to stay on screen and then move out and have that all automated. So with the fade out here, I had it happen after build 2. So the fade out starts with build 3, but it happens after build 2. But I put a delay in of 6 seconds. And what that meant was that all of this happened automatically. But what the effect of it was, if I preview, the effect is this comes in, my name appears, and then it waits 6 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then it just goes out automatically. So that's how I did that particular part of it. Then the next slide was this one where I'd got all these different bullet points. So this was the agenda that we were going to go through. So again, I've used the magic move here, and the magic move looks like this. I've got all of these different shapes over here. In fact, probably it's better to start the other way around. Let me start with what I've got on the screen. I've got basically this orange shape here. I've got this blue shape, and I've got this white shape. And if I just actually play this transition for you, it should make a lot more sense. If I play it in window, you'll see what happens. So here we've got my name coming on automatically just down there. It's going to wait 6 seconds. And then when that goes off, it will go, when I hit the button, it will go to the next scene. And you've got that little animation of things sliding out. You'll also notice that my camera slid out as well a bit, or slid over to the side to make room for it. That's one of the reasons why I like this, is because I want to have, me front and center when I'm just talking, but then when I've got bullet points to talk about, you can have it so that they just kind of come into the side and you still stay like right in the center of the screen. But then it looks a little bit weird that you've got, potentially something like right next to you and nothing on the other side. So I like to be able to sort of move out, so I'm still in the center of the viewable space, if that's making sense. So we've had this animation of these things coming on, and then I can just bring those bullet points in as I want to introduce them. And now I'm just basically advancing that with, as it happens, a Stream Deck button to go to the next one. But let's look at how that was achieved then. So here we've got the shape as I want them to appear on screen. And I always find that that's the best place to start, is you actually create the thing that you want to have, the way that you want it to look on the screen when everything is on. And then what you do is you go back to the previous slide, or duplicate it and go back to the previous slide. And what you can see here is all of those elements. So this blue one here, the orange one, and the white one that's behind it. They are all also in the previous slide, but they're actually all out of the way here. So I've got the white part is up here, the orange part is over here, and the blue part is over here. And because I'm using Magic Move, you now know from the previous example with all of these moving things over here, that basically with Magic Move, when you go to the next slide, it's going to take those elements from wherever they are now and move them to wherever they are in the following slide. And so these are just basically moving in from the side. This one, I just added a bit of an angle to it so that it sort of slides in like that. And actually the reason I did that was because what I'm also doing, you'll notice my camera position here is over here. Whereas in the next slide, my camera's moved over. So I literally just moved that camera over to the side. And when I had these things all moving in just in a straight line, it caused this weird effect where there was almost like a gap next to the camera. And so that's why I did this slightly weird thing, but in the end, the effect looked all right, is to have this white section here sort of rotating, and it meant it was right next to the edge of the slide, and then as it moved in, it was moving at exactly the same rate as the camera. Not sure if that makes entire sense, but if you watch the animation of it again, hopefully it should make sense. I have to wait 6 seconds for this one to work. There we go. So then if I click now, you'll see that the white thing just sort of has got a bit of a rotation to it, but it meant it just kept up with the pace of the camera moving, and that's why I did that. So in terms of the animations on screen then, the actual shapes in the background are happening using the Magic Move. The things like this, if I go to the build order of the logo, so that's faded and scale automatically after transition, and then all these different bullet points are basically a collection of day one is a different thing to so the day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are a different element on screen to the actual titles here, but you can see that I've just linked those together. So that should all make sense now. Day one, multiple cameras. So day one happening on click, multiple cameras, the one after it. You can see they're kind of joined together, and that's happening with that build too. So that's how I'm bringing those things on with the push of a Stream Deck button. Actually, just coming to this slide, that's a great place to bring up Bill's question. So in Ecam Advanced Slide 4, the bullet points were aligned trapezoidally. How do you do that? So that was it with the alignment tool, Bill, and I'll show you where that was. In fact, this was the thing that I showed on with these shapes as well. So if you want to align these shapes and you've got them just wherever, and this could apply to text boxes as well, then just highlight all of the things and then go to Arrange, Distribute Objects. You can either do them horizontally, which is going to align them like horizontally, You can also do arrange vertically, so distribute objects vertically, and it'll do align the vertical alignment. But you can also just do those two things at once by doing the arrange, distribute objects evenly, and it will just do the sort of combination of both of those things. So that's that. So in terms of just coming back to this animation, I think that pretty much covers the way that I did that. And then so I basically just duplicated this. This is kind of like my base slide, if you like, which has got these different elements all ready to come on screen. And then there were some slight variations on this. So you can see how I've got that one. This was one where I brought up a chart. Again, the elements that slide out are these. I'm just positioning these in a different place each time. And then these things I bring on with using animation. So the magic move is basically what I'm using to just put in this background. And then the on-screen animations are what I'm using to bring in the different elements. So yes, I think that covers that. That covers that. Same sort of thing in all these. Oh, these titles, by the way. So I did a whole series of titles as well. That is exactly the same thing. So these are just animations on the screen. So if I do the build order on here, you can see these things sort of coming on the screen at the bottom. And again, I did that automatically so that when I click it, it brings on that title. So if I play this in the window, yeah, it's just going to bring this thing up from the bottom, brings on these titles, and then it should just go off again automatically after some certain amount of time. Having those things coming up though as well is useful to sort of accentuate. Oh, incidentally, you'll notice there, if ever you are doing stuff in Ecam with where you're sharing your window or sharing a desktop or whatever, just make sure that you don't have your mouse over the window. You won't see the actual mouse pointer if you're sharing a specific window in Ecam, but you can see it now because I'm sharing my screen. But what will show up is this little bar at the top. So you get this bar in Keynote. And incidentally, the way that this would work in Ecam is if I switch to a scene that's basically sharing just my Keynote window, then it would look like this. Let me just take that little ticker thing off the bottom as well. So this is how it actually looks in Ecam. Now what you're seeing is my camera coming through Keynote and then screen sharing my Keynote window. But what I was mentioning is you don't see, what you'll see is my mouse, just a second, as I'm sharing the screen. But if I click into my Keynote presentation, you see that little bar at the top. You don't really want that to come through into Ecam. So just make sure that you haven't got your mouse over the presentation. But then when you advance to the next slide, this is kind of the effect of it. So you can see now how this creates a sort of much more like immersive experience of giving presentations. To anyone who didn't catch the actual Ecam Advanced, let me just come up to here. I'll just sort of go through a couple of these just to show you what it looked like. Play in window. Sorry about this. Play in window. You'll see what it looks like again. So this was like the actual experience of doing this full screen into Ecam. You can now see that transition and understand how that was made. My name's going to pop out. And then just in a moment, it'll pop off and we'll bring in that thing from the slide like this. And so yeah, that is how this all sort of looks in terms of a final output. I think I've screwed up my camera because I've got this little border down at the bottom because I moved it out of the way to demonstrate this, but you get the idea. So as a way of giving presentations, this is a much more effective way, in my opinion, than using a slide deck and being sort of over to one side of the slides. Obviously, if you've got massive slide decks already created, then it's difficult to sort of go through and change all of those. But if you are creating anything new, doing something like this, I think gives a much more immersive experience of, they're focused more on you, and the bullet points are really there just to sort of highlight and accentuate the points that you want to make. So Rich is saying, so if you interact with Keynote presentation whilst you're sharing the window, does the title appear? So it's this thing here. Can you see that little? If you mouse over the window, you get this little bar at the top. It's because it's basically Ecam is just sharing your entire Keynote window, which includes this. this sort of bar that appears. So as long as you don't mouse over it, there's a Keynote, there's a Keynote plugin for Stream Deck. So there is a sort of forward and next slide on there, so you can just do it that way. That's what I do. I control it with that. You can also control it with a little clicker like this if you have got one of those to control your presentation that way. Incidentally, if you are someone who uses speaker notes a lot with your presentations and you want to have speaker notes, then those are still available even when you're playing Keynote in a window. And in fact, you can see that up here. If I just come over to here, it's this one here. That little two icons there is going to open up the speaker notes window. One thing that will happen when you do that, though, is you need to make sure that in Ecam, you actually open that up first, and then you share specifically the Keynote presentation rather than the whole of Keynote, because otherwise what will happen is if I open my speaker notes, you should see now Ecam is trying to fit in the speaker notes as well, and it's having like a weird effect because I'm moving around the speaker notes on the screen as well. So you just need to go into Ecam, and for the overlay, make sure you're just sharing specifically that the actual presentation window. But what this means is you could, in theory, then, if I just come back to my regular scene, you could, in theory, have your speaker notes so you can see what slides are coming up, just in case you're not sure what I'm talking about with speaker notes. I will come over and share this. Where can I do this? Let me do it this way. Zoom in on here. That's showing the right screen. Yeah. So this is the speaker notes window. So you can see your whole sort of slideshow. This is the actual slideshow just at the top. But I've got the whole slideshow going down here. And then if you add in any notes, you can have those down there. So you might end up having, if you use a teleprompter, you could have your Ecam display going to the teleprompter, and then just down below it, you could have your speaker notes, or you could have your notes going up to the teleprompter, whichever works well for you. But then just so that you can see what you are talking about. So if I just, and this is just where you can change the way that the slides are shown. So it's going to show you the current slide as a default, and then also the next build. So it's going to show you basically what the next thing coming up is. So again, if you're not really, if you need that sort of prompting, then the speaker notes can be a useful way to do that. I digress once again. Let me just change that. Whoops, turn this one off and close down the speaker notes. So Dale saying, does your desktop have a black background? I couldn't get the Keynote window to appear in Ecam and perfectly fit into the Ecam scene, and part of the desktop was revealed. I tell you what, I think I know what that is. So let's hope I do anyway. I should do, shouldn't I? In Ecam, when you add in overlays, let me come to my this one. I think if I share this, right, I'm now sharing my Ecam window. When you add in an overlay, so I'll just go and just add in a screen share overlay. And I'm going to share the Keynote window. This is so small, I can't see it. There it is, Keynote. Right, so there it's showing my whole Keynote window. But actually, the default behavior of a screen share in Ecam has actually got this little setting. So if I come into Ecam settings now, I'll drag this across here. There is a setting in screen sharing. Yep, which is this one. Add margin when sharing the desktop or when sharing. And you can see how it's put that little margin around it. And so what you're likely getting is this. Even if you line it up to the top, you're probably seeing something like that. And no matter what you do, you've always got that little shape there. So if you come into those settings again and just turn that one off, then you'll find that it doesn't have that margin. And now that it doesn't have that margin, sometimes there's issues with it like snapping, because you'll see that it will snap to these little guidelines. So you see there that little blue bounding box. It will snap to that. So just make sure that you go right to the right until it just sort of locks in place. Incidentally, when you're moving objects around on the screen in Ecam as well, if you hold down the shift, it will lock it to either the horizontal or vertical axis. So now if I'm holding down shift you see how even if I move the mouse left and right, it's only moving in the vertical plane. And I can do the opposite, which is just move it right. But now, even though I'm moving my mouse up and down, it's still only just locking it onto that plane. So if ever you want to lock anything, you've got it aligned up on one side and you just want to move it in the other direction, hold down the shift key and it will sort of lock it in that respect. So just take it and line it up to one corner, make sure that it's perfectly lined up and locked in, and then come and drag the bottom corner and it should just fill the screen. So if you've got the things set right in terms of the turned off the border, and you've aligned it perfectly to the top left, when you drag it down to the bottom right, it should perfectly fit because it's just a 9x16 slide, the same as the as Ecam is 9x16. So that it should hopefully solve that, Dale. But let me know if not. But that is likely what I suspect is happening, is that thing with the border. And incidentally, I always turn that off just because I always prefer to just frame things in any case rather than having a border around them. A little trick though, just while we are talking about that, in case you are someone who does that, if you want to share an app window and you've got that switched on, well, I'll just share my Stream Deck. I'm going to add another overlay and I'm going to share my Stream Deck. Whoops. Where's it gone? Stream Deck. Okay, so I'm sharing my Stream Deck app. I don't have the borders on, as you can see, because it's not got a border at the top. But because this app will not physically fit into a 9x16, we've got those little edges there. Now, you can obviously crop this. So you can crop any overlay. And so if I hold down the Option key, I can drag the corner to crop like that. That's one way of doing it. But there's also this function in here called green screen. Now, if you've got a green screen in your overlay, as you might have in Keynote or something like that, in fact, I should probably talk about green screens as well. If you've got a green screen in your if you've got green in your overlay, then this will remove it. But it also, just as a kind of like little side function, is even if your desktop isn't green, it will remove the desktop from any time you're sharing an app. So if I turn it on now, you'll notice how it just makes the background of the desktop completely disappear, even though I do have a sort of really very dark grey, not quite black background. So that's just a little thing that if you are ever sharing a particular app, you can always do that as well. And in fact, if you have the border on, let me just turn it back off again. Let's just say that you do have that function on because you do want to use it sometimes. Show border. So now we've got the border at the top and the bottom. Again, it would just get rid of that for you. But one thing to note though is it will also get rid of anything green. And so you may notice that like if I come into this, I don't know if I've got any green in this particular window, but if there was any green in this window, it would also get rid of that. So it's not a great solution always, but it can be useful sometimes. So I'll just turn that one off again. So I'm going down a bit of a rabbit hole with Ecam here, but hopefully that helped. Let me know if it did or if it didn't. So I'll just talk then briefly about, since we are talking about green screen, and I've talked here about how to use the camera feed into Keynote here. So let me just change this to another scene for a second. I'll just come over to this one. So here I'm using the live video in Keynote, and I mentioned that not all cameras would work with that. So how would you do something like this if you didn't have a camera that was compatible or that worked with Keynote? Then what you could do is, rather than do this, you could quite simply, if I just create a shape, I'm going to create a shape here that is basically just a green square. Format, let's just make it green. And I'm going to move it so that it is basically just in front of where my camera is. So now we've got this green shape here. Okay, if I come to this one here, I'm just going to put a green square. I'm going to move it down so it's above where my camera is. Do this one here as well, add it in here. And then we'll leave it at that. That sort of proves the point. So now I've got a green screen. So now if I go into my scene in Ecam, where I have got my my screen share overlay, and what I'll do is, let me come back to that one. Where is it? This is going to look a bit weird for you for a second, just while I sort this out. I need to just change the setting of this for a second. Let me do this in let me do this in demo mode, and then you can see what I'm actually doing. That might be a useful thing to do, wouldn't it? What an idea. Okay, so I've got this Keynote scene. This is actually a screen share scene. So let me just, instead of this, let me just build a new scene. Okay, right. I've got a new scene there. I'm going to put my camera in first of all, just in the background. So let me just make my camera as a scene source. It's going to be easier. Not that one, Alec. This one. And I do talk to myself sometimes, by the way. As you can tell, I'm going to add a screen share overlay, and then I will make this one Keynote. Where's it gone? Keynote. And we'll make that full screen, covering it up. So I'm going to completely cover this. When I do the play in window, this will all make a lot more sense. And I'm going to turn on the green screen feature. You can already see it's knocked out all of that green in the desktop. So now if I play this slideshow in window, remember that my Keynote slide is now just green. There's no camera coming into Keynote for this. But I'm getting exactly the same effect. So now you are seeing my Ecam camera, but I've just taken the green and blocked out the area where I want everything to show up. So we're getting the exact same effect. The one thing that you won't get is you won't get my camera like moving over to the side. So when I bring the things on from the side, you get something like that. So you might have to just move over, or at least not have it come quite so far into the scene. But that's all just done. Again, no live video in Keynote. That's all just done with the camera in Ecam, but then we're using the green screen so that the animations come onto the screen that way. So I also use that. Sometimes I'll use this. Maybe if I show you another example of how you might want to do that, is if I come back to my, whoops, wrong one. I'm going to end this slideshow. Let's just come and make something really quick. In fact, if I just, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate. I'm not talking nonsense, bear with me. I'll just create a completely new slide. Add a new slide. Like that. So I have got a slide, by the way, that I created in my slide master called green screen. Bear in mind, as well in Ecam, you've got the option of using blue screen and green screen as well. Although in the screen share it's only green, but you can use that sometimes if you're creating animations to come over the top of the screen. But for now, I've got green screen. Let me just create a shape like this. And maybe we change the color of it to something a little bit darker, like that. And we could do our little magic move trick, duplicate. And on this one, we'll move it off the screen. Then on this one, let me just grab a couple of little bits of text. I'm copying these because it's going to copy these little animations. And we'll just call this bullet 1. Get the idea. Let's just do 3. There we go. And then I'll just move these all over here and line them up slightly. So the magic move is going to move that shape onto the screen, and then when I click advanced slide, it's going to move them, move the things, bring in the text. And then if I just duplicate this one that's got the shape off to the side, and hopefully we should have magic move on this. If I just double check that, animate, add effect, magic move. Right, so maybe just speed it up a little bit as well. Okay, so if I go play this in slideshow, I'll play that in window, and I'll go back to that scene that I just created a moment ago, which was, where was it? This one. Okay, so now I've basically got, if I stop doing my demo mode, now basically I've got my, my Keynote is over the top of that, and it's green. So it is actually active as an overlay. If I go to the next slide, what's going to happen is the magic move is going to bring that shape out from the side. pressing the button is going to bring on those items of text like that. And then once I've finished, if I click again, it's going to go to the next slide, which basically has got the magic move to move the square out. Because the bullets aren't on the next scene in any case, it's just going to fade those out, just like that. So that's another way that I use to actually bring things onto the screen when I'm not doing like a full presentation where it's all been done in Keynote. It's great for doing little animations like that. So let me come back to this one again. I have got the hex code. I can't just remember it offhand. I will drop it into the chat. In fact, I could probably find it actually. I don't remember it offhand. I usually remember hex codes, but for some reason I can't remember that. I'll find it. Hex code for green screen. Here we go. Copy. I'll just drop that into the chat. What was that, Jeff? So I've got a voice from the Discord. Was it 808080? Did you say 808080? Is that for green screen? Is it? I'll drop that in there. That's the grey, isn't it? I think that's for here's the that's for the grey on the back wall. I think here's the green screen one. Yeah, I mean it's not totally critical, but yeah, this one I think 00B14 0. There you go. Yeah, I think the 80 was for the grey that I've got on the back wall. Right. Okie dokie. So in terms of the animations, what I've been doing here as well, this is kind of like for live animations. Just let me take that down for a second, Bill. For live animations, you can also export as well. And I'm just conscious of time. Don't want to keep everyone too long. You can also export any things that you create in Keynote. So let's have a look at how to do the exports, because you could do things here as well. That little thing here that I've got, for example, let me show you how to do this. This is probably a good example. I'm going to take this. I should probably be sharing what I'm doing, shouldn't I? Really, that might help. I'm going to take this little section here. So if I wanted to create a little animation of my lower third coming out, then I could come down, create a brand new slide. I've just copied it from there. Start with a green screen slide actually, and paste it in. So now I've just got this little thing here. Let's say I want to export that as basically a transparent video that I could use in Keynote, in Ecam, to make a little sort of lower third to use in without having Keynote open. So what I would do here is I would change the slide background. So I'll go to Format. Current fill is going to be the default for that slide, which is this green color. But you can also change it to no fill. So that's going to be transparent. It's going to look black whilst you are working in it, but just know that if you have got this set to no fill, it's effectively transparent. So I want to basically just export this slide with its animations. And if we look what this animation is, we know what that is now. It's this thing that comes in, it waits for 6 seconds, and then it goes out again. So what I want to do is I go to File, Export, Export to. You can export to PDF. If you have got a traditional presentation, then you can export it to PDF, and then you can actually just bring a PDF into Ecam. So then you can just sort of cycle through that way. So if you've got any processor issues and you don't want to have Ecam and Keynote open at the same time, you can do that as well. You're not going to get any animations on there, but that's a way to just get a presentation into Keynote, and it's kind of into Ecam, and it's embedded. But you've also got these options here. So PDF, you can export to PowerPoint if you want to do that. But then you've got movie, animated GIF, images. So if I go to movie, then you can see that you've got these options. So playback, self-playing. Obviously, you're exporting it as a movie, so you want it to play automatically. You can select the slide. So if I just find the slide, in fact, let me just come back out of that. That was, where's this slide that I've just created? Where did I create that? There it is. It's slide number 4. So File, Export. I'll try that again. Export to movie. And then we can go from slide number 4 to 4. So I just want to export that one. go to next slide. So if you had a long presentation you wanted to export as a whole movie, you can do that with, you know, the automating even the mouse click. So go to next build after a certain amount of time. I'm not doing that, so I just want it to, it's just going to do it automatically anyway. Resolution, so you can change the resolution. I'm just going to put that to 1080p just because that's what I've got on here. In fact, actually, no, I tell a lie. I am going to type it in here, 1080, 1920 by 1080, because there's one other thing that I want to do down here, which is in the compression type, I want to change that to Apple ProRes 444 because that's the one that allows us to have a transparency. And you'll notice that if I've got this set to H.264, which is another common codec, this export with transparent background is you just can't click it. So you do need to make sure that is Apple ProRes 444. Now I can export with transparent background. And now if I click on next, I can just export that. So let me just come here a second while I do that. Make sure it's going into find out where it's going to save that. I'm just going to save it to my desktop for now. There we go. I'll just add it down there. So that's now creating a little movie file of that. Now, actually, if you were creating lower thirds, you wouldn't necessarily create like a whole screen and then have the lower third just at the bottom. You could create a presentation in Keynote. Bear in mind how I said you can change the size. Whoops, wrong one again. My fingers are all over the place today. You could come into Keynote and you could actually make the document change the size of the slide size, custom slide size, and make it, you know, something a lot smaller. You know, maybe 300 pixels tall by 600 wide, or whatever you want it to be. So that's how I do it when I am using this to create little animated things like that. I don't use the whole screen, because what we've got now is if I come to this exported movie file, and I'm going to open it up. It should open up in QuickTime. Back to that. Where's that happening? So now I've got basically this QuickTime file open. So this is a movie file that we've just exported. And when I hit the play button, you'll see that it's basically got this animation coming in. And that is, in fact, a transparent background. Again, it's showing up as black because it's just playing it in a movie. But if I was to come back to my Ecam now, I'll go to my Ecam main scene. I'll share this with you so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to take that movie and I'm just going to drop it onto my into my overlays for this scene. In fact, I'll just have to unlock my scene first. I'm just going to drag and drop it into my overlays window. So if I come over here and I want it to show, in this case, let me show in all scenes. I'll just drop it in here. There you go. And you see that immediately it's just come onto the screen. So that's a way that you can make a lower third in Keynote, export it as a movie file, and then you can drop that movie file into Ecam, and then I could assign a Stream Deck button to it, so that basically just when I press the Stream Deck button, boom, my lower third pops up, just like that. So yeah, that's how to export as movie files. You may want to export as images. Hopefully that should be pretty obvious as well how to do that. If I come back, pretty much the same as we've just done. File, export, export as images, and then you're going to have the same things there. So the slides that you want to create, whatever you export, it's going to create a folder with slide 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on in it. You do have an option to create an image for each stage of the build. So if ever you wanted to do that, you know, have an image for each individual one. So yeah, you could do that. I'm conscious of the time. Look at that. That's automatically popping up. I'm conscious of the time. I am going to be doing a full sort of masterclass. Hopefully, this has been helpful in terms of giving you a good sort of overview of Keynote. I have got a masterclass planned on Keynote, though, that's going to go into a bit more detail on all of these things and sort of break it down into sort of more manageable structure. It's going to be available as part of my academy. And I've got to just mention this because there's basically 1 week left of my launch pricing for my academy. So the Take One Tech Academy, you'll see here, we've got a series of beginners guides coming out. And then masterclasses. Obviously, I've got my Ecam, Zoom, and Rodecaster masterclass. Next one coming out is the Stream Deck masterclass, and then you'll see here down in July, Keynote masterclass is on the cards for then. So that is going to go into as I say, hopefully today's been really helpful in terms of just showing you the way around and how to use all these different functions and giving you a lot. I'm sure many of you can just run with it now. But the Keynote thing will go into more detail in terms of crafting presentations as well, more detail on the the ways to use some of these animations and specific animation techniques and things like that, maybe some slightly more advanced stuff as well. And obviously, part of the thing about the courses and the feedback that I get is that people just like to have that structure there in terms of being able to go in and just look at a specific video on a specific topic, rather than like today has been obviously a 2-hour plus live stream, so it's going to be easier to sort of find that. So that is all in the Keynote masterclass. There's also other benefits to being a member of the Academy, so monthly workshops, accelerators, which are the cohort-based programs. And then also there is obviously one-to-one coaching, and there's various different tiers associated with the Academy as well. So you can get access to various different things depending on which tier you're in, and what level of engagement you want from me and from others in the community. So you can check all of those out at takeonetech.io/academy. Like I say, there is special launch pricing with up to 30% off all of the tiers, and then there's also additional discounts if you have already done one of my courses, and you should have received an email about that if you've already been done one of my courses, because obviously this includes some of the courses that you may already have done. So if you've already done them, I don't want you feeling that you're paying twice. So I'm offering basically an extra 25% discount, and that applies to either the launch pricing or after that's finished in after March. Then you'll still get that 25% off to the pricing going forward as well. And there's no time limit on that particular one, because if you've done my course, you've done my other courses, and so there's no expiry to that particular thing there. If there are any other questions, then do let me know. I will also just mention that, obviously, speaking of courses, that if I just bring this up here, we'll be on the stream show this week back over on the Ecam channel. I've just realized I've just covered up this scene. I think I've just messed up this scene actually by adding something in. Where's it gone now? Where's it gone? Where am I now? I've completely messed up a scene. Never mind. I am going to be on the stream show with DJ Strick. I see what I've done. Let me bring this up. I am going to be on the stream show with DJ Strick this Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern. And why is that not working? That's weird. I won't let myself get squirreled by it. Anyway, this Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern on the Ecam channel, which is going to be all about course creation. And I'll be talking specifically about using Ecam to create courses. There it is. It's there. I'm going to be talking specifically about using Ecam to create courses, and also the general flow of creating a course as well. So that's all going to be coming up, as I say, Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. If you've got any questions about anything that's being covered today, do feel free to leave them in the chat. Also, consider joining the Discord over at takeonetech.io/family. If you're not familiar with Discord, don't be afraid. It's a really great place to have sort of structured and organized conversations. And so, any questions you've got about Keynote, you can drop them in there as well. Well, thanks all for being here, and I hope that you did find this useful. I will leave a link to some other sort of presentation-based videos over on the right-hand side for anyone watching on the replay. Thanks so much to all of my channel members on YouTube. You can join to be a member. Thanks also to all the people who have already signed up to the Academy, and I really look forward to doing some great things together with all of you. Have a great day, everyone. I'll see you next time.